Good morning, sir, and to all the participants present in this session. This is Anika Sharma. Currently working as an external manager with the Amicus Curiae, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Today we have with us, and I welcome you all on behalf of Amicus Curiae to this national webinar on impact of COVID-19 on Indian judicial system. And to enlighten us on this topic, we have with us Mr. P.K. Malhotra. He has an experience of 4 decades in the field of law and has been a part of various important assignments while working with Government of India. He was a secretary, legal affairs as well as legislative department in the Ministry of Law and Justice Government of India. He was member Law Commission of India, presiding officer and member Security Appellate Tribunal, chairman Adjudicating Authority and under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act and judicial member Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. He was involved in the processing and finalizing of many important legislations including the Criminal Amendment Act to 2013, Companies Act 2013, the Arbitration and Conciliation Amendment Act 2015, Commercial Courts Act 2015, the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code 2016 and various others. He has handled legal issues on constitutional law, administrative law, commercial law, cyber law, ADR, and various other sectors as well. He also dealt with issues relating to telecom sectors as well. He has also worked as arbitrator in a large number of cases between Government of India and Department of PSUs. And after demitting office as secretary, Mr. Malhotra has been practicing as an advocate. He had a brief stint as Secretary General, International Center for ADR, New Delhi. He he is also enrolled as an arbitrator and conciliator for some of the central public sector undertakings, including BHAL, ONGC, GAIL, NHPC, NTPC, and various others. He is handling a number of arbitration and conciliation matters, including the cases of large PSUs. He and his achievements and his designations does not end here. I have a lot to say, but I have time constraints. So I would just like Sir to take over and enlighten you all with his experience and insightful ideas. Sir, please. Sorry, sir, your mic is mute. Can you just unmute your mic? So you're not audible, just unmute your mic.
Okay, good morning. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, very much.
I think my mic was muted from your side, not from my side. It was muted from the host side.
Okay, sorry, sir, I didn't know.
Okay, no problem. Good morning, Anika. Thanks for that wonderful introduction which you have given, and I'm really humbled the way you have presented it. I still consider myself to be only a student of law, and therefore, whenever I get an opportunity to interact with the younger generation, I never miss this an opportunity because learning is a never-ending process. And I feel that people like me who have spent their whole life in the field of law every day learn something or the other, and this changing the social and economic scenario, no person is better to for we people like me to learn from the youngsters. Uh, I thank Amicus Security and more particularly Mr. Rupam Banerjee who contacted me and requested me to interact with the young generation, the lawyers and the students who are part of this Amicus Security group, that I should speak to them on the current situation, the topic COVID-19 and pandemic and its impact on the judicial system or the judiciary or the functioning of the judiciary. I thought this is a good platform which I can use and I can share my thoughts on this particular topic. because having worked with the government for 40 years and now for the last 4 years practicing as an advocate and a legal consultant and working as an arbitrator, dealing with many disputes, I find that I too have faced certain difficulties during this changeover scene. And I must share my experience with you and probably learn something from the participants here during the question answer session. Before I start my talk, I must compliment you for organizing this webinar on a very important day. Today, the nation is celebrating 125th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and the central government has decided to celebrate it as a Prakarm Divas. Uh, I think I don't need to say much about Netaji because all of us have read a lot about him. His contribution in the freedom struggle as an aggressive freedom fighter, and his contribution is no less than contribution made by any other freedom fighter or the national leaders whom we recognize today. Unfortunately, the kind of recognition which should have been given to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, the way it has been given to some other leaders, was not given, and probably his death also became a matter of controversy. And even today, that controversy has not died down. But let us learn lessons from his life. He was also a staunch supporter and follower of Swami Vivekananda. And I think we have to learn a lot from these two names which I have taken. And I thought before I start my talk on today's topic, I must mention this particular aspect, compliment you, all of you, and congratulate you, all of you, on the 125th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Coming to the topic of the day, that is COVID-19 pandemic. All of us know that this is an unprecedented situation which our generation has faced. I wish no further generation has to face this kind of situation which we have faced, which came to the world almost 100 years before, and now after 100 years, a similar situation has arisen. The whole world was shattered. Uh, more than, I think, more than 200 countries. I mean, today's countries number is more than, I think, 210, and all of them were affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. Reportedly, there are about 9.9 crore cases in the world, and about 2 crore, 2 crore deaths have taken place in the whole world. And on the top of it is the US with the 2.52 crore cases, that is 2 crore 52 lakh cases, and 4.2 lakh deaths, that is 4 lakh 20,000 deaths. And in India alone, which is second largest to be affected, we had about in India 1 crore and 6 lakh cases, and more than 10 lakh 53,000 deaths which have taken place. Therefore, to control a situation, when the vaccine to control such a situation was not available, I think the steps taken by the government are commendable, but there was little bit of delay in taking those steps, and therefore, initially the chaos was created. The whole country was shut down. Even the three organs of the government, except for the executive, and that too where essential services were required. Barring those, the whole of executive, legislature, and the judiciary came to a standstill for a few days. And probably that was the necessity also, because it was spreading like anything. And had that curfew or lockdown not been imposed by the government, probably the situation could have been much worse. So that was the need of the hour. But need of the hour was such a drastic need that the whole country was shut down, offices were closed, colleges and educational institutions, schools were closed, commercial establishments were closed, and the laborer who were working on day-to-day basis, they have to move from the urban places, from the metropolitan cities to their own villages. There were no transportation available for them, and the kind of situation which we have seen, that many people, while going from the urban areas to own their own houses, they died on the way because medical facilities were not available. It took little time for the government, the central government, as well as the state government, to come out of this scenario and to make necessary arrangement for rehabilitation of these people who migrated from urban area to their own villager area due to this pandemic, because they lost their job, they had no livelihood, and there was a question of their survival. Before this could be done, of course, the government issued a number of orders under the two important legislations which the parliament have passed to deal with such a situation, that is the Disaster Management Act and the Epidemic Diseases Act. As all of you know, the Disaster Management Act empowers the central government, the state government, as well as the district government to take necessary measures to deal with any kind of disaster. And this was also one of the disasters which was never envisaged when the law was made, because you might be seeing the floods, earthquake. Probably all those authorities in the disaster management were well equipped to deal with such situation like earthquake or floods. But they were not prepared for this kind of pandemic where you have to arrange large places for rehabilitation of all these workers who were migrating, for their medical health, for their food, for education of their children. All these things were not conceived, and therefore it took little time to the government to make all these arrangements. And during this period, a lot of damage was done. So far as the judiciary is concerned, judiciary also came to a total shutdown, in spite of the fact that the use of information technology started in the judiciary way back in 90. We had not reached a stage where through use of technology, the judicial system can continue to work. There are two reasons for this. Number one, in spite of the fact that the order was passed by the Supreme Court way back in 2018 for live telecast of the proceedings of the court, steps were not taken in that direction. Although in the there is a provision for filing of documents through by use of information technology, or for getting the orders on the net, for looking at the cause list on the list on the net, but there is no provision whereby the hearing can also be conducted through video conference, or virtual hearing could be conducted. And even if the provisions were made with the efforts which were made from 1995-96 onward, and in spite of the fact that a e-court committee is working in the Supreme Court under the guidance, under the chairmanship of one of the senior most judge of the Supreme Court, the concept of e-courts was not implemented in most parts of the country, and therefore judiciary came to a standstill. Not only even if this was permitted, the fact remained that the litigant as well as the counsels were more comfortable in arguing their matters in the court, and because of this pandemic, because you have to maintain social distancing, you have to use masks. Therefore, it was not possible to enter the courtroom so that you can avoid the spread of the pandemic. So a situation was created that even if there were certain provisions available under the technology, probably holding of physical court was not possible, and therefore the justice delivery system got badly affected. And even in respect of cases of the migrant worker, when they were suffering and petitions were filed, the court was not able to hear it. And even Supreme Court once said that probably it will not be willing to entertain this kind of petition at this stage because the government is taking necessary steps. I think that was not a good observation made by the judiciary, because under the Constitution, it is the judiciary which has to protect the rights of the individual, more particularly the weaker section of the society. And what has happened in this case was, since the Supreme Court initially declined to interfere in this matter, fundamental rights of thousands and thousands of people were affected, and probably because of lack of direction from the Supreme Court, the kind of assistance or the help which should have been extended to them in the initial days of this disaster or pandemic was not available to them. So I think, yes, as I said, It took time for the government, little time for the government to make arrangements. But during that period, maybe 1 month or 2 months, the kind of suffering which the majority of the people have undergone, I think that cannot be compensated in any form. So what was the way forward then? Slowly, the Supreme Court also awakened, since it is going to be a long battle. Pandemic is not going to go away so quickly. Therefore, there was a need to make certain alternatives because of the e-code project already functioning. Then the Supreme Court exercised its power under Article 142 of the Constitution and issued directions to all courts throughout the territory of the country that even if certain practices are not prevalent, but for the functioning of the court, either in a virtual mode or even for physical court, they can issue directions from time to time, like restricting entry of the people in the courtroom or in the court premises. Only those persons whose cases are being argued, or the counsel who is arguing the counsel, will be permitted to enter the court using masks and maintaining the social distance, and others' entry can be banned. Whereas normally you don't ban this kind of entry. So the Supreme Court, passing its order under Article 142 of the Constitution, said that such measures can be taken and such measures will be considered valid even if there is no provision under the law. So this gave a fillip to the virtual court. And why to the virtual court? Functioning of the whole world, the commercial world, also virtually. Take, for example, if this pandemic or the COVID-19 situation would not have been there, maybe instead of this webinar, we would have been conducting this as a seminar in one of the big hall where you were face to face with me physically and not virtually, and we would have been participating. So in a way, this COVID-19 pandemic has given us an opportunity to explore other areas and means through which we can conduct our day-to-day working, which earlier people were reluctant to do. I can share my own personal experience. As I said, I worked with the government. There was a gathering of judges, lawyers, ministers, bureaucrats, and this issue was discussed. I'm talking almost about, say, 9 to 10 years back. And at that time, when I made a suggestion in the presence of them in an informal talk, it was not a formal talk, in an informal talk, that why can't there be a streamlining or the streaming of the hearings which are being conducted in the court. The judges, some of the senior judges and some of the lawyers who are participating there were not very receptive to this kind of idea. They said live streaming is not possible because courts work in a different way. I said, if parliamentary proceedings can be done, live streaming can be done, why can't it be done about the court proceedings? At that time, probably they were not receptive. But COVID-19 created a situation because everything has come to a standstill. So they forced all those people also to use this technology for justice delivery also. And slowly everybody came on board and started participating in this kind of proceedings. Although in alternate dispute resolution, like arbitration, this was already happening. But in the courts, when the hearing were coming, nobody was willing to conduct hearing through virtual mode, and everybody wanted to have a physical hearing. There is a reason also for that, because most of the litigants in our country don't feel comfortable when the hearing is virtual. They feel comfortable only when they are present in the court. They can see the judge, they can see the advocate arguing the matter. Only then they feel comfortable. Otherwise, they also don't feel comfortable. So what happened? So this expedited the process. With this expedition, with the expedition of this particular process, the advantage was, at least now, after 1 year, I can say that virtual hearing of the court cases, as well as functioning of the tribunals, which also function on the pattern of the courts, has become a reality. So the process of digitization and use of technology in justice delivery system, for which efforts were being made for the last more than 2 decades, actually got a fillip because of COVID-19. And before that, the process was little slow. And probably the stage in which we have reached today in 1 year COVID period, had it not been there, probably it might have taken another decade to reach that particular stage. But I know the critic of this will also say that use of technology in the justice delivery system has created a divide in the society. Those who can use the technology, they are in a better position, and those who can't use the technology, they have become irrelevant, or probably they have become unemployed in a way. I'm conscious of the fact, and I know even in a place like Delhi, what to talk of smaller places, Delhi, Bombay, or Calcutta, there may be about 50 to 60% of the advocates who are without work for the last 1 year, because either they don't have the infrastructure, or probably they are not that much comfortable in using that kind of technology, or because the technology itself is not as perfect as it should be for delivery of justice, for the justice delivery system, because it doesn't instill the confidence. Suppose I am arguing a matter sitting in my chamber, and the judge is sitting in the court or sitting in his office, and the client is watching proceeding from a third place. Probably the connectivity itself has become a problem because of technical glitches. Of course, there has been an improvement during the last 1 year, and I expect that this improvement will again be continued, and probably we will be having a better technology use, and probably there will be no glitches in the technology for the day-to-day use, and probably it will increase the confidence of the common man as to how best it can be done. Now, this is about the use of technology, because I said it has created a digital divide in the society. How that digital divide can be removed or can be compensated. Obviously, people on the ground, everybody doesn't have that kind of wherewithal. Suppose somebody sitting in a remote village in Karnataka or in Uttar Pradesh or in Jammu and Kashmir or in Arunachal Pradesh, where either the electricity problem is there is no proper supply, or there is an issue of connectivity because he doesn't have the proper bandwidth and he cannot be connected properly. Probably justice delivery becomes a problem for them. So what can be done? What is the way out, way forward? The way forward is the government or the legal service authority or the courts themselves may provide a center at the district level as well as at the town level, where probably the litigant can go as well as the advocate can go, and they can use the technology where at least the internet services is available and uninterrupted power supply is available. In that case, if this kind of centers are created at the district and taluka level, probably the service delivery system will become more effective. And I think this is one area which I thought I must highlight. But as I said, technology intervention has done wonder. I remember this Supreme Court, which is headed by a senior, one of the senior judges of the Supreme Court, is functioning since 2005. In spite of that, the complete digitization of the courts has not yet happened, for the simple reason because most of the people like me, maybe we are using the technology for our day-to-day use, but we are not an expert in the technology. So probably a time has come where the court officers need to be properly assisted so that advanced technology can be used for justice delivery. And that is not happening only because of their ignorance. And other reason is most of the people of my age group, or maybe a little younger to me, are still status quoist. They feel more comfort in the system in which they are working. If they have to change the system, they have to adopt a new technology, probably they have to change their way. And those who have changed their way have definitely been benefited. I was talking to one of the senior advocates who is practicing in Chennai and is regularly practicing in the Supreme Court. And you know what he said? He said before COVID, if he has to attend a matter, he used to attend only one matter. He can argue a matter in Supreme Court in Delhi, and then other matters are to be adjourned. But today, what is happening? Today, sitting in the comfort of my home, what I can do, I can attend one matter in the Supreme Court through this virtual court proceedings. Another matter I can attend on the same date. which is being conducted in the Chennai High Court. And the third matter, I can attend sitting in the comfort of my home in say Calcutta High Court. So what has happened in this way, the cost of litigation or the kind of fee which consuls were charging earlier has also come down because there is no travel expense more than one matter sitting in the comfort of his. It has come down. He can handle more than one matter, and therefore number of cases that can be disposed of has also increased. So with the use of technology, if it becomes a regular feature, then probably the pendency which we are facing in the court and which is said to be 3.5 crore, 3 crore 50 lakh cases pending in the courts alone, forget the tribunal alone, probably this number can be reduced because once you use the technology, probably your argument time taken in the arguments itself get reduced and the judges can dispose of large number of cases. Yes, connectivity needs to be improved. And I think steps are being taken in that direction. We are much better right now, so far as the use of technology is concerned. But then the question arises, can you handle all type of matter through virtual courts? As on today, based on my personal experience, my view is probably that may not be possible to dispose of all kind of cases through virtual court. Yes, smaller matters, family matters, motor accident claim matter, or violation of the municipal laws. These are the matters where routine, where based on the documents available or the documents filed in the court decision can be taken, probably it is possible to use the virtual court platform. But where evidence is to be recorded, serious constitutional matters are there where long time debates take place and maybe arguments have to be face to face. Probably those kind of matters still be not argued in a virtual court. We need a platform where not only confidence the confidence to the litigant also come, as well as the counsels who are arguing the matter and the judges who are listening the matter. There is no communication gap between the two. As I said, the technology still create a communication barrier. Sometimes it happens. Suppose I'm speaking, you may say, oh, my network is not working, or the bandwidth which I'm using is getting interrupted. Therefore, I'm not able to hear you properly. This can happen. So till that stage comes, yes, use of artificial intelligence is also important, where you can club the cases having similar issues and similar kind of arguments are coming, and they can be disposed of in group. By using artificial intelligence, that can also be done. So all these changes have been accelerated, or they have come in the forefront because of the pandemic situation which the country faced. Still, the digital divide in the country continues. And so far as the question of violation of fundamental rights is there, it is still continuing because courts are not functioning in a proper way. In virtual hearing, I have come across cases where counsels arguing before the court have come to me and discussed with me, sir, this is what is happening. We want to make an argument, but on the other side, either because of connectivity, my point could not be registered with the court and the judge proceeded with the matter. Or judge made certain observations asking a question to the advocate, and advocate wanted to reply, but because of the technology, probably there was a communication gap and it could not be done. So therefore, in important matters where serious legal issues are involved, or where the personal liberties of the individual are involved, or important constitutional issues are involved, or where evidence is to be recorded, probably we have not yet reached a stage where technology can be used, and probably court can effective work, virtual court can function as effectively as in a physical court it can be done. So what is the way out? I think we have to adopt a hybrid model. First thing is situation should normalize, people can go to the court. Second is we can use hybrid model. In using hybrid model, probably we can reduce the pendency in the courts by conducting virtual courts in matters where evidence is not required to be recorded, or which are routine matter or which are group matters. Take, for example, matters under the Income Tax Act. There are repeated appeals by the same company on the same issue in every assessment year. Though the courts are and the tribunals are also using the technology, but still the clubbing is not done the way it should be done. Probably through use of artificial intelligence, those matters can be clubbed. Group matters can be heard. If common issues are involved, virtually it can be done, and probably physical appearance may not be required. And this kind of infrastructure, which will be saved by using the virtual court, can probably be utilized for justice delivery system in other ways. Again, coming to the pendency figure, I still find that during pandemic period, I was just looking at the data which has come to my notice. In the pandemic period, probably the kind of disposal which should have taken place has not taken place because the physical courts are not working, or either the physical courts are not working, or even the virtual courts, when they were functioning, the way they should have delivered it has not happened. I just had the number of cases disposed of by the district court and taluka courts. In 2016, the disposal was 1 crore 3 lakh cases. In 17, it was 1 crore 25 lakh cases. In 18, it was 1 crore 32 lakh cases. In 2019, 1 crore 48 lakh cases were disposed of. But in 2020, when we faced this COVID-19, till for the first 9 months, the disposal was only 44 lakhs. So meaning thereby, because of the shutting down of the courts, people's rights were affected. They could not go to the court and get their rights enforced. Most of the like migrant worker, even most of the professionals, be it chartered accountant, be it company secretaries, be it advocate, they were also affected because they couldn't discharge their duties properly. And therefore, the court has to issue order from time to time. In addition to, as I said, that the Supreme Court permitted all the courts to adopt measures which will help them to conduct the proceedings in a way without spreading the pandemic. Probably entry of the lawyers and the litigants into the court premises, that was stopped. Virtual hearings were permitted by the Supreme Court, and similarly, Supreme Court directed extending the period of limitation in all the pending litigation, so that the litigant doesn't suffer because he cannot go to the court, he cannot file his petition. So on the ground of limitation, it doesn't suffer. By passing a general order in exercising its power under Article 142 of the Constitution, the Supreme Court said the period of limitation will automatically stand extended. It's not that the judiciary alone took this step. I think the executive also was equally conscious of this particular aspect, executive as well as the legislature. And therefore, I'm quoting the example of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the provision are that you have to file a petition within the specified time for the insolvency of a firm. And then the rehabilitation process or the revival process start. And there are timelines given there, and the maximum timeline being 270 days. And since this time was running out, therefore, the executive and the legislature decided to extend the timeline or to defer the implementation of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code by a period of 1 year. I think this is again an unprecedented step which the executive and the legislature has taken. And this became necessary in the interest of justice, so that the business keeps on running, the employment, people doesn't get unemployment because of the closure of the industry. So I think all these steps became necessary. Now, we have already seen this situation, what was happening for the last 1 year. I think situation has now stabilized. Vaccine has come. Life is slowly returning to normalcy. I remember when the lockdown was declared, the Prime Minister said, he made a statement while declaring lockdown, Jaan hai to jahan hai, meaning thereby save your life, stay inside the house, shut everything else unless it is absolutely essential. Don't come out of the house. But after 2 months, when the government realized that the situation is going to continue, Then the Prime Minister said, Jaan bhi, Jahan bhi, meaning thereby you save your life by taking all the precautionary measures like using masks, maintaining social distance, sanitization, and all that. But at the same time, you go to work also. So the work also started. Now, slowly, we have come to a stage where work is coming to normalcy with all the precautions which are required to be taken. And now we have, fortunately, the vaccine also. And India is leading in that particular aspect in the world. And to many of our neighboring countries and even to the developed world, we are supplying the vaccine which has been developed in India. So with that, a level of comfort among the people has increased. Similar comfort level has increased in the judiciary also. And therefore, the courts, some of the courts have started out of the total courts which are functioning, at least 10 are now functioning physically. District courts have also started functioning. Some of the tribunals have also started functioning physically, maintaining the social distance, hygiene, and mask and social distancing, whatever is required. That all procedure, SOP, standard operating procedures, are being followed while conducting these courts. But then what is the way forward so far as the judiciary is concerned, so that the justice delivery system is not affected? And for this, I would just like to make an observation, because when I was just doing some general reading, it was said, and I was reading an article where it is said, and I read it here for the benefit of the participants in this particular webinar. It was said that we are in unprecedented time. The COVID-19 pandemic has posed a never imagined challenge to every sector of the economy and every activity of the nation. When it comes to the legal world, the challenge is even graver. It ought to be, as the word of the bar and the bench is a part of the whole system of access to justice and how this access to justice could be maintained. It was not long ago that the Constitution Bench, in the case of Anita Khushwaha versus Pushpa Sudan, while holding that access to justice, apart from being a facet of right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, is a part of the guarantee contained in Article 14 as well. The bench also described the essence of access to justice. What do you mean by access to justice? Now here, of course, as I said, use of technology becomes important, and you must set up centers at the district and taluka level where those people who doesn't have access to the internet or don't have computers, they can go and use the services which should be provided either by the state legal service authority or the district legal service authority or the national legal services authority. These facilities should be provided so that the advocate and litigant can go there and participate in the justice delivery system and get their disputes redressed. Then the process of adjudication must be speedy. Now, of course, as I said earlier also, the use of virtual courts will definitely help in expediting or the speedy disposal of cases, because the system itself will change. Most of the time will come in the written arguments which are uploaded in the system, and there will be lesser oral argument which will expedite disposal of cases. Then one more important element which was described by the Supreme Court in this case was the litigants' access to adjudicatory process must be affordable. And as I said, if you are conducting proceedings sitting at the home, the cost or the fee which advocate charge or the cost of litigation itself will go down. Probably this will also make justice affordable to a common man or litigant. And where it is not possible, as I said, the state has already evolved a mechanism under the Legal Services Authority Act, under which the National Legal Service Authority, the District Legal Service Authority, and the State Legal Services Authority have been constituted, and provision for legal aid has been made. People can make use of it centers can be opened where justice delivery system become more effective. And as I said earlier, this question of e-filing of the documents has become a very, very relevant now. And I think in almost all platforms, be it the district court, be it this high court, be it the tribunals or other organization, even the department, say for matter, the commissioner appeal in the income tax department, all these appeals are filed. E-filing is permissible and e-filing has become successful. So any system, when you change from one system to another system, some people for some time have to face some difficulty. And I think this is that time when we are switching over from physical to virtual, and therefore technological glitches or the difficulties which we face in filing of the returns or the use of the technology. I think this is a temporary phase. Initially, the difficulties were more. After 1 year, the things have stabilized a little more. Maybe after another 2 years, system will still improve with the use of artificial intelligence and with the use of improvement in the use of cyber space. I think we will become more comfortable in conducting this kind of proceedings. And there can't be a better example than what we are doing right now. I think all the participants are sitting in the comfort of their home, sitting in front of their computer. I am also sitting in the comfort of my office in front of my computer and interacting with all of you. Yes, the kind of feel which you want, which you have in physical interaction may not be here, but definitely we can convey, we can communicate, we can do our business, and we can discharge our responsibilities and duties by using this kind of technology. So what needed to be done? Then the question arises, what needed to be done? And I noted down few points, which I thought I'll share with you. Let me just find out my slip where it is. So as I said, and I'm now repeating it again, the use of technology in the virtual holding of virtual courts and use of technology in justice delivery is a work in progress, which started systematically in 2005 with the establishment of e-court committee in the Supreme Court, which was giving direction to the high courts as well as the courts down the line as to how the technology can be used. That work, which was in progress since 2005, got expedited during COVID-19, and now we are in a much better position. A work which otherwise would have taken a decade could be accomplished within a year or less than a year. Then use of artificial intelligence as well as settlement of dispute by using online dispute resolution mechanism is also very important. And I think this is also progressing or taking place in a big way. I'm happy to share with you that the government of India have also authorized some of the organizations for conducting online dispute resolution mechanism, International Center for Online Dispute Resolution, this Confederation of Industry, CII, and CIAC, Confederation of CIDC, construction industry. They have also Hello, am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, I think it got disconnected probably.
Yes, so your voice was not audible for some time.
Okay, my apology for that. So as I
No
said,
problem.
we have now to adopt a hybrid model. Hybrid model is going to continue for some time, and I am of the considered view that most of the disputes can be resolved through virtual court procedure, but there will be still certain matters where physical hearing of the cases will be necessary. And to remove digital divide, what we should do is to improve the technology which is being used and to ensure that the kind of secrecy which need to be maintained, that is maintained. That we must have a strong law on this, and the data protection bill which is pending in the court should be realigned to take care of all the situations which were not conceived earlier, and the data protection should see light of the day as early as possible. And there is a need to till we are fully compliant with this, there is a need to establish a center at the town level, at the district level, to ensure that those who don't have access to technology at their residence can go and participate through these centers. And again, at the cost of repetition, I say that if you have to use the technology, if you have to use virtual courts, if you want live streaming of the proceedings, then data privacy and data protection is a very, very important aspect on which a lot still needs to be done. And I don't think, I think we have done enough in that. Probably we have to do a lot of work on that. And if we are able to do that, probably whatever lessons we have learned in this pandemic and whatever new normals we have adopted in our functioning, more particularly in the justice rendering system, I think we can make it more effective. And I see that the opportunities which were created by this pandemic has taken the judiciary and the whole legal profession to the next stage, making us much wiser, and probably justice delivery system in this new normal will become more effective, more efficient, and probably the kind of allegation which we used to face in the past, that there are delays, probably that delays can also be checked and can be made, the justice delivery system can be made more effective. I think I have in fact done a lot of speaking. Maybe the participants, as I always say, people like me of my age, we have worked in a particular system. So our mind is tuned. Because our mind is tuned, we think on a particular track. And probably the innovative ideas which we need should be implemented always generally come from the younger generation. And it is people like you who are participating in this webinar can probably come out with the new ideas which can be implemented on the ground level. No doubt experience is important. Experience is needed, but experience with the innovative ideas can take you to the next stage of justice delivery system. Therefore, I will stop my talk here and will look for the questions from the participants, and let me see how, if ably, I can answer the questions which are coming from the participants in this webinar. Thank you very much. And I once again thank the amicus curie for affording me this opportunity to share my thoughts with all of you. And Rupam Banerjee, more particularly, who in fact contacted me and persuaded me to interact with you and have a word with you. And Anika, thank you very much for conducting this proceedings in this wonderful way without any interruption. Thank you very much. Over to you, Anika.
Yes, sir. There are some questions in the chat box. I'll read them out. One is from Syantini. She's asking that what is your take on hybrid mechanism for disposition of cases post COVID scenario, and do we need any specific legislation to regulate the online proceedings?
I think that's a very good question. Of course, I made a reference to it in my talk, but as I said, even prior to COVID also, it's not that the hybrid model was not working. It was working in the sense filing of documents, filing of pleadings, and your delivery of judgment, and for that matter, cause listing, everything was available on net. But only so far as the actual arguments were there, in most of the courts, it was not happening. Maybe with regard to judicial remand and other things in criminal matters, it was being done through virtual courts, but most of the other cases were being heard in the physical model only. It is only because COVID-19 pandemic created a situation where, because of the precautions which were required to be taken, physical working of the court stopped. Therefore, a situation arose where by use of technology, this system started. But at that time also, the dedicated systems were not available. Some people were conducting it on WhatsApp or other platform or Zoom or other platform, and it was felt probably the proceedings are not secure, and the kind of privacy which is required to be made or should be done in these cases is not being followed. So there, but with the passage of time, now it has begun. The court proceedings have also started. Even the Supreme Court is also conducting virtual proceedings. The high courts are also conducting, district courts are also conducting, but only because of the direction given by the Supreme Court under Article 142 of the Constitution, which are binding on all authorities, and which gives legality to it. The virtual courts have become a reality, and the cases are being disposed of. The number has gone down because the Supreme Court has said that in virtual, till we are able to stabilize the procedure, only important and urgent matter will be taken. But only, I mean, the gray area is which matter is urgent or important, probably that will be decided by the court. If I make an application to the court that this is an urgent matter, it may be urgent or important matter from my point of view, but court feel it's not important. So court will not grant a hearing. So I get disappointed. But in a physical court, the advantage is the counsel goes before the judge. When he speaks there, he is able to explain it. But here, that kind of comfort or the time which you need in virtual courts, you are not getting because the procedures have not yet streamlined. Yes, I think even under the existing law also, a lot of it can be done by the guidelines that can be issued either by the High Court or already issued by the Supreme Court. And since the Supreme Court has authorized all the courts to lay down the procedure for conduct of these virtual hearings also, probably there is no legal bar as on today. But yes, for future, if a uniform practice can be adopted, either under the instructions issued by the High Court or instructions issued by the Supreme Court, probably it will make life for the litigant as well as for the practitioners much easier. That's my answer. And as I said, hybrid model is going to continue for quite some time. There cannot be two opinions on that. And I think that will definitely help in the justice delivery system.
Thank you, sir. So another question is from Vaibhav. He is asking that various major legislations like Farm Bill and national education policies have been enforced during the pandemic. So is the judicial activism facing any severe setback because of this?
That's a good question. Probably, I think it needs another webinar. I mean, the Parliament passing this kind of legislation affecting large population during. But the only counter question which I will ask Vaibhav is the Parliament prohibited or debarred from passing even important legislation during this pandemic if all the procedures laid down under the law are followed by the legislature? I think the answer is no. Parliament is fully competent to make laws. The only requirement was that all the procedure and the established practices which were prevalent should also be followed in passing that law. The questions are being raised. You talked about the farm law also. It is a major policy decision on the part of the government. Government says the law was passed by the Parliament. But the allegation being leveled by those to whom this law is not acceptable is that the procedure which should have been followed in passing of this law has not been followed, and the views which were coming have not been taken into consideration, and there it is going to affect the life of large number of people in the society. So therefore, probably the laws need to be reviewed. If you follow all the procedure as laid down under the law, what they are alleging is probably there was no debate in the House. If that is correct, then probably it is a matter of concern, because in a democracy, all organs derive their authority from the Constitution, and the Constitution lays down a procedure which need to be followed. If that procedure has not been followed, well, there can be a question mark. But the government says the bill was debated, it was properly argued, and it was in public domain, and therefore there can be no question of it. I'm not going into the merits of it. What the answer to the question which has been raised is, legislature is fully competent to pass laws even during this kind of pandemic if the procedure laid down for passing such a law is fully complied with and followed. I distinctly remember in 2014, the government of India has come up with a policy of pre-legislative consultation process. And I find in most of the cases, this pre-legislative consultation process is being followed. This enables the participants or those who are affected by the law, the NGOs or the public spirited people, to give their views to the government. Government consider those views, then they go to the parliament and get the bill legislated. So if that procedure is followed, I think most of the problems which we are facing today can be taken care of.
Thank you, sir. So another question is, once the India gets successfully vaccinated, so will we return back to the physical courts or will continue with this online thing?
No, as I said, even if the medicine is successful, the fact remain we have moved to a new normal, and the next stage of functioning of justice delivery system, where use of technology, which the government or the common man wanted not from today. The attempts are being made, as I said, from 1995, 96. I remember this process started, where there is a separate committee in the Ministry of Law and Justice, Department of Justice, which have been monitoring it. And even the judges appointed committee is also monitoring it, but we were not moving forward. Of course, completion of pleadings and all those things, uploading of the judgments on the screen was being done. You see how convenient with the use of technology, many of the methods have become very convenient. Now take for service of someone. If you have the email ID, you have the WhatsApp address, you have the mobile number, you can do it immediately. Earlier, there were cases which were pending for 2 years, 3 years only for service of summons. So the technology has brought this change. Similarly, with regard to justice, this delivery of judgment, I remember if you have to obtain a certified copy earlier, it will take months together to get a certified copy of the judgment. Now what is happening, even if you don't get a certified copy of the judgment in say months, or you get it only in weeks, but you can immediately access the judgment on the internet. You can know the contents. You can decide your future course of action. All these things can be done very, very quickly because of the use of the technology. You remember this right to privacy judgment? It runs into more than 1,500 pages, which was given in 2017. That 1,500 page judgment, the moment it was delivered by the Supreme Court, it was available on net to everybody who wanted to access it. How easy and convenient the methods have become for the litigant. So access of justice to litigants has become more convenient. Therefore, this hybrid model will continue even after pandemic situation goes, even after the coming of the medicine, and even if other things become normal, use of technology will definitely accelerate and help us in the justice delivery system, and it will become more comfortable, more convenient, more affordable for the litigant as well as for the practitioners.
Thank you, sir. So another question is, there have been major advancements in the legal fraternity during the pandemic. What is your take on the BCI update on practical advocacy experience?
No, can you please repeat the question?
So, by the BCI has recently said that you need 3 years practice before giving any judicial services examination. So, what is your take on that?
Oh, okay, this question is not directly relatable to the pandemic 19 situation. I think it's a policy decision which need to be taken by the government, whether it is proper. You see, there can be two views on this. One is, of course, a fresh law graduate coming out from the college. If he simply knows the law, but he doesn't know the nitty-gritty or the functioning of the courts, probably he may not be a very good, he may not be a very good judge because he doesn't understand the procedural aspects of the court. But then the counter argument to this is that now, with the improved system, when recruitment in the judiciary is made, you have judicial academies at the state level as well as at the national level, where all these judicial officers are given training from time to time. They update their knowledge. Similarly, for the newly recruited judges, maybe in Delhi Judicial Service or UP Judicial Service, before they are actually put on the job, if they are given a proper training in the judicial academy itself before they start working as a judicial officer, I think the objective can be achieved that way also. So what method you want to adopt, it's a question of policy and it's not a question of legality or illegality. Maybe one feeling is that a person after taking a law degree, he must practice for 3 years so that he understands the procedures of law. Now, let me share my experience with you. You are all youngsters. You are much better informed than what we people were when people like me passed out law. I passed out law from Delhi University in the year 1976. And when for the first day I went to the court, I was totally at sea what is happening in the court, what proceedings are taking place, because whatever has been taught to me in the law college is relevant only when the case comes at the argument stage. Before the argument stage, how the pleadings are to be filed, what court fee is to be affixed, how I have to get the application drafted, all these were not taught in the law college. We didn't have the kind of moot court which you are having nowadays. So probably you are a better informed people because you work as an intern. You also participate in moot court. You also go to the legislative assembly and see how they are working. You also participate in the legal aid camps, which facilities were not available at that time. Now these are available. So you are definitely a better person to practice in the court. But sitting as a judge, sitting on the seat of justice, whether that kind of experience which an advocate acquires while practicing for 2-3 years, is it really relevant for discharging a duty as a judge? I think that's a very important question. So whether you want to do it, like as I said, BCI is saying, or as the state is saying, okay, you pass out the judicial service examination and then go for a training in judicial academy as is being done in case of civil services. What happens in civil services? A young graduate passes the civil service examination through UPSC, then he is given a training for 2 years, where practical training is also given. And then he goes and start working as a officer in the state or in the central government. So whether you want to adopt a method of a kind of training which should be given in the judicial academy before he actually starts working as a judicial officer, or you want that he should have a practical training as an advocate before he goes and sit as a judge, I think it's a matter of policy. There is no question of legality or illegality on it.
Thank you, sir. Sir, another question is from Swarashi. She's asking that is COVID-19 an opportunity for law firms to reaccess and strategize?
Yeah, surely. I think law firms, of course, they keep on coming with innovative ideas. And COVID-19 pandemic has given an opportunity to innovate the way in which they have been functioning so far, and under the new normal, how they should function in future, because functioning of the courts in any case is going to change. Not only courts, all tribunals, and even in the executive also. As I said, in many of the cases, even the investigating agencies, instead of calling the persons, they send them summons, they send them questionnaire, ask them for their reply. Most of the time, they would like to have, when no serious issues are to be discussed, but general information is required, they may get in touch with you through virtual mode and may ask some information from you. So since under the new normal, the whole functioning is going to change. Therefore, the law firm also have to change their strategies with regard to working. And I think most of the law firms who can afford it today, they're already working on those lines. And I think you as a student of law or as a young practitioner should also acquaint yourself with the new normal. And I think we have to update in that. Earlier, there was a time when we used to say that to become a successful lawyer, you should not have only knowledge of law, but you should also know how to present yourself, how to argue the matter. But today, I will add one more thing, that you must also be a fully tech savvy before you can become a successful lawyer. So use of technology, not only use of technology, how best it can be used in the legal profession. I think you have to be expert in that also. Now, many a time I have found, and this is a message to all the youngsters who are participating in this webinar. When the technology started and people started filing pleadings in the court, and I remember in one of the functions, one of the Supreme Court judge made this observation where I was also invited and I was also participating. He said, what has happened, the technology has done a damage to the system. Why? Because young lawyer, what he will go? He will go for a Google search or some other search. He will say, suppose you are looking for some judgment on the interpretation of Article 136 of the Constitution with regard to filing of SLP. He will just click it, get all the judgments under 136 without going into the content of it. He will simply copy, cut, paste, and say that my petition is ready without bothering as to what the Supreme Court has said with regard to interpretation of 136 in that particular judgment. So technology must have done wonders and it might have made your job easy. But the kind of reading which you have to use, the kind of input which you are supposed to give, if you are not giving that input, then probably that will be not a use of technology, that will be misuse of technology. And it is a warning to all youngsters, by using technology, use it in a way that if a question is asked to you on that particular judgment, you should be ready to answer that. And that can be done only when you have read it and when you have not only done cut and paste. If you are doing that, probably it may be a short term game, you may succeed. पर वो कहते हैं ना हिंदी में, आप लंबी रेस के घोड़े नहीं हो सकते, आप सीनियर एडवोकेट नहीं बन सकते. You can't be an advocate who will be in demand. If you want that, then the kind of labor which you have been doing earlier, reading you have to do. You must have your library, whether it is virtual or the physical library, you must have, and you have to go through it. Simply cut and paste through technology will not make your job easier. It will make your job difficult. So use technology with caution and apply your brain while using the technology.
Thank you, sir. So another question is, will online courts will be acceptable by the people or respected by the people the same way they accepted the traditional courts and respected the traditional courts?
Well, my answer is yes. And in most of the foreign universities, it is being done. It's not that online courses are, only thing is online courses, what are the content of the online courses, how the interaction takes between
Sorry,
the
sir,
student
but
and the teacher. I think these are all important issues. But yes, online, as I said, the kind of, as I said, we have not still come to a stage where all sorts of courses can be online. There may be certain courses where physical interaction becomes necessary. Take, for example, even in the law courts, as I was saying, you have to get the training in the legal aid center, or you have to go and work through an NGO in some remote village or remote area. Your physical presence is required there. For that physical presence, you have to first understand the problem and then apply it to the law laid down by the courts. So for that, yes, 100% it may not be possible, but most of it can be online. But only thing is, when you do a course online, probably the course content, the way you have interaction with with your faculty, and what kind of input your faculty is giving, and what kind of scrutiny or interaction between faculty and student is going on, becomes more important. But this may be relevant at a higher education. So far as the education at the school level or the basic level is concerned, probably I think physical interaction is still required, but in a higher education or for addition to your knowledge or for addition to your qualification, probably online courses will be successful, and they will be in future. I think they will be very successful also. No question mark on that.
So actually, I was talking about online codes. That
My
online
apology.
code.
My apology.
So,
You are talking about online course. So see, this is the difference in physical and in virtual. In virtual, you said online course. I heard it online course. So that's the difference. Anyhow,
no problem.
online course, as I said, in the hybrid model, it is possible, and they are going to function because technology is being strengthened. Only thing is, as on today, because of the digital divide and on the use and on the data protection, there are certain issues. With the passage of time, when these two things are taken care of, probably online course is going to be a reality, but not in all matters. But in most of the matters, I think online courts are going to be successful. This will be easy access to justice sitting in your hometown. A person, say, sitting in a remote village of Delhi or Haryana need not go in Haryana, he need not go to Chandigarh High Court, or he need not come to High Court in Delhi. Sitting in the comfort of his home, he can see what the counsel is doing, what the judge is listening, or what the judge is asking. And probably it will be a very easy way, and online courts are going to be order of the day, but not in all matters, but in most of the matter, it is possible and it will happen.
Thank you, sir. Here is the end of all the questions that were in the chat box. So I would just like Mr. Rupam Banerjee, who is the founder of the Amicus Curiae, to just present a thank you note to the sir. So Rupam, please.
Thank you, Anika. Am I audible?
Yeah, very
Yes.
much.
Yes. Thank you, Anika, for the honor. The Amicus Curiae family is really obliged to have you, sir, here with us, and thanking you for sparing your valuable time to engage with the law students on this special day, which is also the 125th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, on the topic of impact of COVID-19 on Indian judicial system. We really feel honored to get an understanding of the topic from your experiences and thoughtful ideas, sir. Last but not the least, I'd like to thank the entire team of the Amicus Curiae for pulling up this national webinar in a successful manner. We hope to have more such sessions with you, sir, in the near future. Thank you once again, sir, for your time today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So now the participants can leave the meeting. And thank you very much.
Thank you.